2, 1.
Perfect. Good morning. Recognizing a quorum of commissioners, I call the October 16th, 2023 meeting of the Cannabis Control Commission to order. This meeting is being held remotely pursuant to Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022 and is being recorded. Commissioners Camargo, Stebbins, Roy, and myself are participating in today's meeting. All votes taken today will be done by roll call. We have a full agenda today that I will generally summarize. First, we will begin with opening comments from commissioners and then move into a regulatory review discussion regarding delivery license type with a possible vote. Next, Commissioners Camargo and Stebbins will provide a regulatory review update regarding social consumption. And our last item on the agenda today is a discussion regarding the appointment of an acting executive director. I will ask the commissioners wishing to comment to or ask questions during any part of today's meeting to please raise your hand to be recognized. With those initial comments, I will now turn things over to my fellow commissioners for any comments and or updates. And we will go in alphabetical order. I will give my comments last. Commissioner Camargo.
I'm all set. Thank you and good morning. Just looking forward to getting through today's agenda.
Awesome. Okay, Commissioner Roy.
Likewise, I'm good to go, ready to get to work. Thank you.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Just going to say ditto.
This is great to the point. And with those opening statements, ditto as well. I don't think that I have anything added that, we didn't bring up on Friday. So we can get right into today's conversation. So the first thing that we will talk about is bringing back up our delivery license type conversation. I think we were looking at 3 areas for additional information. But let me take a step back because Commissioner Camargo is also the co-lead on this conversation. So I will give you the floor as well, Commissioner Camargo.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I just want to say just sort of a recap on Friday. First of all, I want to say thank you. I said it at the end of Friday, or Thursday, I think. Thank you to our fellow commissioners in terms of having a very comprehensive and deep conversation around delivery. It's the first time that we were really able to understand the issues, look at the policy topics, hear from one another. So I think that, I feel good about it. I think that today's conversation is really to get that update from our team, but then obviously at the end or possibly is figure out where we're at in terms of some of these issues and a possible vote. But I think we had some outstanding items from our acting general counsel, Andrew Carter, our director of government affairs, Matt Jinkola, and our director, I believe, Noam as well, might have had some information. So we can go in order. I think we're not using the PowerPoint today, Friday's PowerPoint in terms of the issues. I don't know if we have that PowerPoint readily available because it had the 4 issues. If we don't have it, that's okay. But Attorney Carter, I see you on camera. So would you like to give us sort of your update?
If I may, Madam Chair.
Yes, please. Acting General Counsel Carter.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, commissioners, and thank you, Commissioner Camargo. So as the discussion on Thursday, we did discuss and the commission did take a vote to request that the legal department conduct a legal analysis for the board's consideration, focused on the area of deliveries and where they can occur in the Commonwealth. So I did connect with my team on this matter, and they have begun performing research. They have identified cases that may be on point. They are looking at statutory schemes both in the Commonwealth, but then also potentially other jurisdictions. And then lastly, if there's any comparisons to other industries that we can look for, just so that there is a full analysis for the board's contemplation. However, I will say, legal writing does take some time. So I did flag for the acting chair that the legal department would require additional time in order to have a full analysis for the board to rely on when setting policy. So it would be my expectation that the legal department would be prepared to submit such a memo either in the November or December timeframe.
Commissioner Roy?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Attorney Carter. Could you add another item to that? Because we received a memo from a lot of the folks in delivery saying that we really didn't delineate between B2B deliveries versus B2C deliveries, so business to business versus business to consumer. And they are different. They can carry different amounts in their vehicles. So I was just wondering, when we do look at other jurisdictions or other statutes, we can delineate it a little further to see if there are differences in the B2B versus the B2C. And I'm also going to ask Director Khumalo, when she presented those 40 incidents, how many were business to business versus business to consumer? I think that's important, and we need to kind of look at them separately in a way. So I just wanted to flag that for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Roy. I don't know if Commissioner Camargo, if your hand was up or not, so I'm looking your way in case it is.
If I may, Madam Chair.
Okay, yes, please, Acting General Counsel Carter.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Roy, for that question. I do believe that sounds to me like a question of data analytics and presentation, so I would be happy to take that feedback back to the team and let them know as it relates to the level of information that the commissioners are seeking as part of their review.
Acting General Counsel Carter, do you have any? I understand that just having the full breadth of the issue and having that legal analysis is hard to do in such a short span of time, because I know we talked about this on Thursday and then it allowed for Friday, but that was only a singular day. But what I wanted to ask you is if you had any sort of preliminary legal information that we can, that you can share with the commission at this point.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. So what I would say is the legal department identified 2 cases that may be relevant to our discussion, both involving marijuana establishments. Full disclosure, I have not had the opportunity to review, so it is a very preliminary analysis. We're also, as I said, looking at other statutes that may be on point here. But what I really would say is, and I think that this is what we discussed on Thursday, is really this will be a question most likely of statutory interpretation. So when we're thinking about interpreting a statute, we look at the plain meaning, we think about the intent in which it was written. So from my perspective, this is really about developing legal options for the board to contemplate. And ultimately, I'm hoping that we can have maybe 1, 2, or 3 options for the board to contemplate as they think about how they may want to interpret their statute, but then also revise any corresponding regulations. So there also, of course, will have to be the need to identify any regs that may need to be changed based on the way that the commission is choosing to interpret its statute, which of course we know administrative agencies are given deference when interpreting their statutes and their regulations, but ultimately policy making really needs to be based on a foundation of facts and support. So it is really my goal for the legal department to provide that support to the board in order for you to have a full discussion and for you to be able to make a full decision.
Thank you. Commissioner Camargo.
Thank you. Attorney Carter, you sort of gave us somewhat of a timeline. I know that timelines are, are hard because we want to make sure you're getting all the right information. You're thinking, I know that our next meeting is November 9th. I'm not sure if we have a second policy meeting, but you're thinking no later than December?
Yes, that would, excuse me, if I may, Madam Chair.
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Camargo, for that. Yes, it is my hope that the November-December timeframe is really what we're aiming to identify. I have discussed it with my team, and they do believe that that's a reasonable timeframe in order to conduct a full analysis. Like I said, if ultimately the analysis that we are providing to you is what you're going to rely on to make policy choices, I want to make sure that you're getting something that potentially could withstand scrutiny, could withstand challenge, and
Sure.
also has the sort of fullness of the options before you, because ultimately the policy making falls within your purview.
That's helpful. Madam Chair, if I may, I don't have any other further comments or questions at this point around this issue, but I didn't know if you wanted to sort of check in if anybody else did, and then I can go to the next issue.
I think I have sort of a question overall, and this is to manage both internal and external expectations around the regulatory process. So I will say, I don't think I've said this on the record in terms of what I saw us going forward with, is that I believe the commissioners we're having this discussion. This is part of sort of the next regulatory package that will also include some other priority issues as well. So not just delivery, we have the micro business conversation coming up. So that might be a part of that overall package. Suitability is still a conversation. I know that we're having a conversation about that today. But to manage expectations, I guess this is my question to you, Acting General Counsel Carter. What does the holding off today and waiting until a later date, whether that be November, December, what does that do for the overall timeline for another regulatory package?
Yes, if I may, Madam Chair.
Yes, please.
Thank you for the question, and I think that it may be appropriate for us to have a further discussion as it relates to timing, because I do hear a number of issues or priorities from the board, and ultimately the board sets the priorities and the commission staff execute on them. But it does sound to me like there is potential regulatory change around delivery, around micro businesses, and then of course we have social consumption, which has been a very
Yes. Did I say suitability? I meant social consumption. I'm so sorry. Social consumption that we're having the conversation about today. My brain. Sorry. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely, Madam Chair. So from my perspective, I do think it may be prudent for us to think about sequencing, because one of the things we have to always remember is the back end promulgation period. So we have to think about notice, posting in a newspaper. We have to think about filing draft regs with the secretary's office. We know that filing regs does take it's a manually intensive process to make sure that everything is properly formatted. Then the next thing we have to do is we have to hold a hearing. We may also invite a public comment period. Then we have to do the exercise that we engaged in just last month, which was basically a line-by-line review of the proposed changes, discussion amongst the board about language, what language is appropriate where, and then ultimately there will be that final vote, which will then send the matter for staff to promulgate. So there are a number of steps in the regulatory process, and it may be wise for us to contemplate how we sequence it in order for maybe we just hold one hearing. If the board feels otherwise, I think we can also accommodate that. But ultimately, I think that schedule is something that we should be thoughtful about because it may allow the commission to operate most efficiently.
Thank you. And that's really helpful. I want to be mindful of sort of the way we're going about this. And because she was on my mind today, I also want to again thank Director Mercedes Erickson, because I know that, she, along with a lot of different staff, have gone above and beyond to the point where I know they were working like crazy within the last few months. So that is helpful. I think that, listening to that, understanding our process, that we've just done. We understand that this will take a few months, if that. Like, it might be a good portion of time, but I asked that question because I wanted us to kind of level set and make sure that all the commissioners and staff here are aware, and anyone who is listening externally understands that this is a process, and that's helpful. So with that being said, I will pause now. If there are any other questions about this item, I will let Commissioner Roy and Commissioner Stebbins ask those questions before giving it back to Commissioner Camargo. All right, Commissioner Camargo. Oh, I'm sorry, that's a hand. Commissioner Roy. So this is around the issue of the No Town conversation. So Commissioner Roy.
Okay, so not the 4 items as a
No,
whole?
so we're still having the conversation
Okay,
now.
on
I
the
think
No
Commissioner
Town.
Camargo was moving on to the next issue that was spotted
Okay.
in our presentation on Thursday.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Camargo.
Thank you, Attorney Carter. I'm sure you'll stay somewhere in the background. So I think the other conversation that we had, and Commissioner Roy, you mentioned it a little bit in terms of Director Kamalo and the incidents that we were all talking about on Thursday, is I'm assuming that Director Kamalo is on here today. No? Okay. So let's put that one on pause for 1 second, just because let's go to, and I'll check in with Noam for a second. I don't know if we assume that she would be here and having the conversation, or if we were going to have that conversation a little bit further. However, Matt Gincola, go to the next issue. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning, Director Giancola.
Good morning.
Good morning, Matt. Matt, I know that you were doing some again, and I know you only had one work day, but I think you were going to do some quick preliminary research and get back to us a little bit on some of the issues that we talked about in terms of the 2 agents in a car throughout the country. But tell us just a little bit in terms of what did you guys figure out on Friday?
Yeah, absolutely. And good morning, Commissioner. Good morning, Chair. The Government Affairs and Policy team has been engaging with other jurisdictions around the country regarding their requirements surrounding delivery licensees, whether they require multiple agents in a vehicle, and also whether there have been any notable incidents reported. We're still compiling a lot of that information, but thankfully we have received a number of states responding. The baseline of what they have been stating for the most part is that there have been very few, if any, incidents that they have encountered. There are incidents regarding unregulated illicit operators. There have been some robberies, some violent crimes committed against those individuals, and generally speaking, in those cases that we've seen, a high percentage have been singular agents in one vehicle. So we're continuing to work with other jurisdictions to get more information, broader information that we can share with the commissioners and the rest of the team here. But sort of the broadest response possible right now is that there have been very, very few incidents nationwide.
Thank you, Matt. And Matt, I know that oh, Madam Chair, if I may. Yeah. Matt, I'm sure we'll have some questions, but I know that on Thursday, between you and Noam, I know that we talked about sort of a game plan in terms of the 2 agents in a vehicle. And I know that Noam was going to gather all the NODs, which was going to take a little bit of time to gather and come back to us so that we can further understand them and discuss them. But I also know that we agreed to do the 2x2 in terms of Director Kamalo getting back to us and us meeting 2-on-2 as commissioner. So I know that was a thing. I don't know if anybody has any questions for Matt. And I'm assuming, Matt, that there's still more to come.
Yeah, absolutely. We're still compiling information. Thankfully, a lot of the states have been very proactive in sending us a lot of the information so far, but I think there is more to come. So we want to be sure to present a full picture to the commission.
Okay. And Matt, what is, I mean, we just had this conversation with Attorney Carter, but when you say you want to, give us a more robust picture of the state, right? What's the timeline? What do you all need in order for us to have that data and information and for us to process it?
Oh, I feel comfortable that this report would be ready by the November 9th meeting.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's good. All right, that's good news. Madam Chair, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you. Director Giancola, with the outreach, what are you asking? What information are you requesting from the other jurisdictions?
Sure. So we're asking what their framework is regarding the number of agents that are required to be in a vehicle for deliveries, whether there have been any reported incidents regarding delivery vehicles, the operation of these licensees, and what incidents have come about. So that's pretty much the broadest types of questions that we're asking, and then certainly depending on the responses, we'll be sure to follow up if there is a need to get greater detail or clarity.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Roy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director Giancola. In regards to reported incidents, what would be helpful if you could really go granular on that? Because Director Kamalo had said crossing state lines, there was diversion, there were delivery to no towns, there was, I believe, delivery to public housing, federal housing, I'm sorry. So if you could, if possible, if these other jurisdictions have that information, I'd be curious, since a lot of the other jurisdictions only require one agent in the car. And yeah, I just think that would be super helpful for us. So thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Director Giancola, how many, you might not have this information, but if you do you know how many other states have delivery? I think we referenced this in our last meeting too, but I wanted to ask you to state it for the record here if you can.
For adult use, I believe it was 8, and then there are many other jurisdictions that allow for medical deliveries. Other states that allow medical only deliveries do require 2 agents. I believe Massachusetts is the only state that requires 2 agents for adult use deliveries, except for Connecticut. If you are transporting more than I believe 2 pounds of product, then you do need 2 agents. But other adult use cannabis delivery states require 1 agent in the vehicle.
Commissioner Roy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Matt, the same thing I asked of Acting General Counsel Carter. Is it possible to delineate it from B2B, business to business versus business to consumer? And we did get a memo from the third-party transporters, and I was rereading it last night, and they're in favor of keeping 2 drivers. The third-party transporters are. So I just try to break it apart to understand where the incidents are happening and if it's more from business to business versus business to consumer. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Some states that do delineate it that way are sharing information, I believe, where it is broken down like that. We'll make sure to see if a state does have that breakdown. We can add that into our report as well.
And Director Giancola, I think it would also be helpful if we also receive information on how long they've operated in the adult delivery space.
Absolutely.
Okay. Commissioner Camargo.
Yeah, I just want to, Commissioner Roy, I know you mentioned the third-party transporters, so and I know you mentioned that they're not in favor of the, releasing the 2 agents in a vehicle, but I actually have different information that some of them are. So I just want to make sure. Oh. Yeah, I just want to make sure with the public that, when we get to third-party transporters, and I know, and I've said this in plenty of meetings before, the third-party transporters had sent us a 1-pager. And on top it has MACT, the Massachusetts Association of Cannabis Transporters. I would ask all commissioners to reread that again, just because they had asked some clarifying questions, but I only say that because Commissioner Roy, sort of your comment and then what I've heard as well. So I think we have to cross the bridge when we get there to third-party transporters, as well as looking at that license and as it relates to the 2 agents in the vehicle. So we should probably have that conversation as well at some point. But I've heard differently, so I just want to make sure,
Commissioner Roy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I appreciate that, Commissioner Camargo, because I did reread that memo last night, and it was signed by all of the third-party transporters. So I thought they were speaking in a unified voice, but you're hearing different information, which is new to me now. So thank you.
Commissioner Camargo.
Yeah, Commissioner Roy, you are absolutely correct that that's what the memo said. But I think since time has transpired and we started having this conversation, I had a check-in call with them, and they said, we're open as well to talking about the 2 agents in a vehicle for certain situations. So I think it's since the time that the memo came out. So I think it's new, but they haven't sent us anything new. But we'll definitely, again, cross that bridge when we get there, because I think the memo they sent is also helpful to understand, clarifying some of the stuff, especially too when it's like business to business, how it relates to delivery and courier licenses as well. So, but that's, again, separate conversation, but I wanted to just make sure we had that update. Chair,
I have a question, I guess, for either Commissioner Camargo or Commissioner Roy, because when we talk about this rule, the 2 agent requirement, the conversation is around removing the requirement, but not around creating a restriction where entities are not allowed to have a second agent in the vehicle. So I think I'm trying to understand, is the fear by removing the requirement that the understanding would be that they're restricted from having a second agent?
Are you talking about third-party transporters?
Yes.
Yeah, I think
Commissioner Camargo.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's just a whole different conversation unless we want to take it up in November or December. But I think it's just a different conversation because we're focused on delivery and courier. So if we change the 2 agents in a vehicle, here, we also have to look at it in other transportations. I mean, we talked about the 40 incidents. The 40 incidents are within the universe of everything transportation, right? So I think, to Commissioner Roy's point in asking and us being very clear on those 40 incidents and who do they belong to? Do they belong to transporters, couriers, delivery operators? So I think having that clarity will allow us to have that conversation further. And I'm happy to take a temperature with the third-party transporters. Commissioner Stebbins and I met with them last year. And I think we met with them again this year. So Commissioner Stebbins, I don't know if you want to join me in that conversation or, Commissioner Roy, but I think it'll be good to take a temperature of the third-party transporters as well, because, they're under transporters. So, just so that we're clear and we understand that process when it comes to the 2 agents in a car.
I think that it's helpful. I'm apprehensive about conflating the two because there are different requirements for transporters versus delivery. Delivery, we have, the body cameras. There are a few other provisions that are included there that are not, analogous to what's happening in the transporter space. So
I agree.
Commissioner Roy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess I'm looking at it from a public safety lens around the 2, and I'm just going to quickly cite from the letter from the MACT, which it says, we want to highlight the safety difference between third-party transporters and courier delivery establishments. Delivery couriers are limited to carrying $10,000 of marijuana products. Third-party transporters can transport in excess of 1 million of marijuana products. The risk of theft or harm to our employees if vans are left unattended or a lone agent is caught unaware is far greater for us. So I just wanted to share that.
I'm glad you flagged that. And I want to, this entire conversation is about public safety. I mean, there's equity for sure. We're talking about equity license types. But the reason why we're having and making sure we get as much information as possible is to make sure we're addressing and not causing additional public safety concerns. And that's the reason why, and Commissioner Camargo and I in our conversations, this is only about delivery couriers and delivery operators. This was not a conversation about transporters because of the differences and not only the capacity of what can be carried but as I also referenced, around the security provisions that are in place. So when we had the conversation on Thursday and then today's conversation, it's specifically around delivery for those reasons.
Mhm.
And that's why you cannot, it's different scenarios, it's different, the different amount of product being transported. They're very different. So by all means, I welcome having a conversation whenever we want to have the conversation about transporters and that license type. But I think it's important for when we're having these conversations today and the continuing conversations about delivery, we're talking about the delivery license types. Commissioner Stebbins.
Thank you, Chair. Good discussion on both fronts. I also gather from some of the communications that we've had from the third-party transporters, I think a lot of them are just being mindful of, you're taking up delivery. How is that going to impact us? Could that impact us? So I think to your point, Chair, just offering some clarity. There obviously are different requirements for the two different licenses. I think to Commissioner Camargo's point, we can go back and reach out to the group of third-party transporters, make sure they're clear about it and clear what our objective here is, but also, to the point we want to entertain any changes to that in the future, we can, but maybe helping them understand these are completely separate discussions. And, I probably have the same public safety concerns around the B2B that Commissioner Roy expressed as well.
And that makes sense. I think it's also, and I'll note this for anyone listening, for us included, that when we're looking through these regulations, there's a way to draft and revise them so that it's very clear that the changes only apply to certain license types. So I understand there will be some tweaks, and Acting General Counsel Carter referenced this in some of his comments about doing an overall review to make sure that whatever changes are made in this space, that it's consistent throughout our entire regulations. Commissioner Roy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then we haven't mentioned the existing licensee transporter. And I threw the definition in the chat. Means an entity that is otherwise licensed by the commission and also licensed to purchase, obtain, and possess marijuana or marijuana products solely for the purpose of transporting, temporary storage, sale, and distribution on behalf of other marijuana establishments or MTCs to other establishments, but not to consumers. So that's also a B2B. So I just want to be mindful of this as well.
Again, separate conversation.
Separate.
But that's fine. I guess Commissioner Camargo, did you have any additional comments? Did you want to go into another component of this conversation? I'll hand you the floor.
Yeah, no, thank you, Madam Chair. I think I think there's still some conversation to have around this. And I think there's some follow-up to do as well with the other license types. Again, not to confuse anything, but just make sure that everybody understands where we're at. I think Madge and Cola, I think you're still on, but obviously, we are rooting and cheering you on while you compile that new report for us with information. And I know that we will hear from Director Kamalo in the next few weeks in terms of the NODs and sort of, giving us some clarification on the two agents in a car. So thank you so much on that. I wanted to call legal Attorney Carter on so that we can discuss discuss the two items that we have left is repackaging for this license type and increasing the licenses. I know that the amount of increasing the number of licenses is a policy choice of the commission and not a statutory requirement. So I think we can talk about that. I also want to talk to legal about repackaging and what that means. I know that Non Kamalo gave us a little bit of an overview of what that would look like for the license operationally. So I think we can take Attorney Carter, if it's okay with you, if we can talk a little bit about the caps in terms of increasing the number of licenses for delivery.
Acting General Counsel Carter.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Commissioner Camargo, for the question. So you are correct that our statute does set licensing caps, but it is 3. And in this instance, the cap is 2. So you are correct that there would be no conflict with the statute.
Commissioner Camargo.
Yeah, thank you. Attorney Carter, don't go nowhere. I just want to, I know that we talked about this on Thursday. I think everyone's temperature was of a supportive one in terms of this one. So I wanted to check if there was any questions for Attorney Carter on this one at this point.
Commissioner Roy.
Putting on a public health hat now, I just have questions about the repackaging. So if a marijuana courier, let's say, doesn't have a big brick and
Not for
mortar,
marijuana couriers. I don't mean to interrupt you. It's only for marijuana operators.
just the operators to repackage. Okay,
Mhm.
so I guess what I'm saying is we need to ensure sanitary conditions, pursuant to our regulations, so there's no contamination during the process of repackaging. So that's something I'd be curious to talk about further.
Commissioner Camargo.
Yeah, Commissioner Roy, good question. And I think that Director Kamalo, if you recall on Thursday, we sort of went through this conversation a little bit because I asked a lot about the operational and about how would delivery operators now go through this process. So if I want to repackage and I have enough space in my warehouse, what does that mean? What does it look like? Do I need a new architecture review and all that good stuff? So I think we discussed it a little bit. I think we can discuss it again if need be. But I think everything that you're saying, Commissioner Roy, will have to be in place. And they will have to, they're going to need some new SOPs around this and everything else, and a new, investigation, or not investigation, but a new site visit inspection to their site, the same way that, they would be now adding to their, license, obviously, in terms of repackaging and being able to do it. And even some training and conversation so that they know how to do it properly, since they have not been operating in that space. So I think all those policies will be tight for them.
I think just to add, and Commissioner Stebbins, I see your hand as well, is the same requirements and added layers that are required of retailers will apply here in the delivery operator space. So that's a better, at least from my understanding, that was how I conceptualized this, is making sure that there's those additional reviews, that there are those SOPs. The same thing when retailers who already have the ability to repackage, the same thing that they have to go through will now be applied to delivery operators. Commissioner Stebbins?
Thank you, Chair. I got to step back a little bit and reflect on the conversations that we're having, because I think it's important to point this out for our 105 attendees that are watching. I really want to compliment you, Chair, and you, Commissioner Camargo, that we've heard a lot about the issues around this license type. I like the fact that we're having a conversation as to directions that we want to go in before we go through the really exhaustive process of writing the regs, redlining our existing regs, and moving ahead. Obviously, this is a good general discussion. I hate to use this phrase, but the devil's always in the details. And I think that as we move through the process, as we get public comment, as we have a public hearing on the regs, as we actually draft those final regs, I think it's important to understand that that's where a lot of these issues get resolved, and we get to see them kind of firsthand in writing as to what the impact's going to be. So I really like the flavor of the conversation. We're getting kind of the bare bones. Some of the stuff we need more facts and information on. I think our team is doing a very aggressive effort to track that down for us. On the repackaging, I think it's a good idea to move forward with, obviously keeping in mind that as long as our licensees understand all the requirements that might be imposed upon them in the regulatory phase, to be able to comply with that, I think is important. So just making sure that the people watching are understanding we're doing, I think Commissioner Camargo called it appropriately enough, the temperature check, and seeing where there is some agreement before we really begin that full promulgation process and really begin to look into the redlining and the granular language about how we make this happen. So appreciate the conversation as it's going along.
Thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. Commissioner Roy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And actually, we're a little ahead of schedule. I mean, it might not feel like that to folks who are in the delivery operator space, but in our regulations, 2 years from the date of the first delivery operator license receives a notice to commence operation, the commission or its designee shall commence an evaluation of the development of the cannabis delivery market in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which may include assessing the competitiveness and concentration of the market, the repackaging and white labeling requirements, and any other matter as determined by the commission. So it's in regs that we need to do this at 2 years, and 2 years won't be till, I believe, April. So this is, you know, in advance of that. So although it feels like an eternity for folks in that space, we're actually a little bit ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner Roy. And thank you for highlighting that fact. I think that's helpful. Commissioner Camargo?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Attorney Carter, and all the questions. And thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. I think that, you know, Commissioner Concepcion and I, all these months, have been thinking about how do we best do this? Because this is not a Commissioner Concepcion and Camargo conversation. Delivery is for all of us, right? I think people have it kind of twisted sometimes that because commissioners bring things to the fold, that you own it. And, you know, I always say, I'm the social justice chair. It doesn't mean I own equity, right? It's all of us. So I think that, thank you, Commissioner Stebbins, for saying that, because we really thought through how do we best have this conversation? How do we put it all out there, right? Like, let's put it all out there. You know, we switch from public health to public safety to social justice to equity. And so I appreciate your comments, and I'm glad that we've gone this route to have the conversation, because this is very helpful. And, you know, whatever decisions we make, they're going to last for the next, you know, I would say 3 to 5 years until the new cohorts of commissioners come and start picking through, you know, the work that we've done. So thank you. Let's talk a little bit about increasing the number of licenses, particularly as it relates to this license type. And I don't know, I know, again, it's a policy issue for us and for the commission, but I wanted to take a read temperature of folks today. And I know Rebecca Lopez was not planning to be here today. I think we talked to her intensively on Thursday, but if need be, I know she is around as well. So I just wanted to check in if folks had any questions around increasing the number of licenses for delivery operators.
Commissioner Roy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know we asked this question last meeting, and I think Acting General Counsel gave an answer, but if he could refresh us why the previous court of commissioners landed on 2, that would be helpful for historical context.
Attorney Carter, please.
Yes, if I may, Madam Chair. And thank you, Commissioner Roy. That's an excellent question. So that I would suggest would be important for us to gather as part of the review process that was asked by the commissioners. I do not recall off the top of my head the policy reason behind it, but I do know it was extensively debated. So if it's helpful, I'm happy to pull the minutes and the meeting videos to send to the board so they can have an understanding of what was previously discussed. But I do think that that sort of foundational building is just such a critical piece that the previous iteration of the commission did speak on this question. And they landed and they voted and they promulgated regs. If the new board or the board in its current construction would like to speak on it and make a different decision, I think it would be very wise to understand the previous thinking and also reevaluate in the moment that we find ourselves in. If I recall, this discussion was in 2020, so approximately 3 years ago. But to your point, Commissioner Roy, I would be happy to pull any minutes or videos if that would be helpful.
I'm in agreement. I believe that would be helpful also. Thank you, Acting General Counsel Carter. Commissioner Stebbins.
Sure. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Acting General Counsel Carter. It would be helpful for me. I think the other issue that we kind of need to understand in this context is the issue that Commissioner Camargo and I are working on, which is around social consumption. Obviously, folks that are in the courier and operator space are SEP participants or EE participants, they are eligible for a social consumption license when that framework is established. So figuring out what that license cap might mean, or the legal framework around that, and whether, again, they could pursue a social consumption license, I think is just an issue I want to put out there and just kind of have in the background of our thinking through of the expansion of the license types.
So Commissioner Stebbins, to clarify, this is, you know what, I'm glad you raised that. That's a really interesting point. So I know Attorney Carter will do some initial legal analysis, but from your interpretation of our existing regulations, there might be that two license cap would then prevent these licensees from pursuing a social consumption license.
Fair to that point. I just don't want us to walk into that trap. I think I want us to think a little more holistically about the issue and what license types, just so we don't constrain any of our SEP applicants. If they continue to be a delivery operator or courier, but obviously understanding that they could be in or prioritized is potential social consumption licensees as well.
Right. That is a really good point to make. Thank you so much, Commissioner Stebbins. Commissioner Camargo?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Stebbins, for that comment as well. I think it's helpful, especially that, you know, today we'll have a more in-depth conversation about social consumption, and I think this will all start making sense because we can't talk to each other. Matt Gincola, Director of Government Affairs, I know you spoke a little bit on Thursday around the license cap and sort of the historical piece in terms of the first Court of Commissioners. Do you want to refresh our memory on that?
Director Gincola?
Sure thing, and I certainly agree with the Acting General Counsel that a broad review of the discussion would be very helpful. I know that there was some consideration of being worried that any one entity could become a monopoly or an oligopoly over the market if they had multiple locations staged throughout the state. We also now have the benefit of a few years of actual operations to see whether those concerns have played out. So I think that's worth taking into consideration. But I do remember there was a worry amongst some of the commissioners that if one operation staged themselves in certain places throughout the state, they could potentially prevent other operators from getting into the industry. So that is one concern that was raised by one commissioner, at least.
Commissioner Roy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know we have that bucket of 4 items, but I just want to throw another item into the bucket if possible when they're doing their research, and that's around the exclusivity period. And the reason I say that is I know Colorado, and we're going to, at some point in the near future, this commission is going to have to decide whether we let it expire at 36 months or we extend it. And I know Colorado, I believe, went to like 7 years of, I believe. And why I'm saying that is if this commission decides as a body that we are going to expand that license type in different areas or change it, then the population that we're trying to help with this license type won't, during their time, didn't have full access to a license that's looks different. So I would say this is important to throw that exclusivity period into that bucket and see what other jurisdictions, because if we do make this a more lucrative license type, then the populations we're trying to help didn't get the benefit of that exclusivity period.
That's a good point, Commissioner Roy. Commissioner Camargo?
Yeah, thank you. And Commissioner Roy, I had some check-in conversations with our team. They are currently working on what's in the regs, which is the data collection to present to us in terms of the exclusivity period. I think that the time would be around next April for them to sort of present that to us, because I think it has to be, there's a certain amount, I think it's 12, 18 months before the 3 years. So I don't know if we will have all that information by the time we get to the end of this conversation. So I just want to manage expectations on the exclusivity period and the time. It may be something that we may have to bring up again at some point down the line after this, but I just want to make sure that I'm managing expectations on that.
Yeah.
Commissioner Roy.
Thank you, and thank you for that, Commissioner Camargo. And I agree. I just, while they're talking to other jurisdictions, let's find out if they've expanded their exclusivity period.
I appreciate that.
Commissioner Camargo.
Yeah, no, I think this is a good conversation. I don't know. It sounds like to me, and this live and in real time, it sounds like we're waiting for some legal analysis on no towns. We're waiting for some legal analysis on the 2 agents in a car. And we just had the repackaging conversation, which it sounds like we're all there on the repackaging, and it's really a decision for us. And then we have the increasing the license caps, which it seems like we want just some last some gathering of information as to that. I think it's fair to say that we wrote possible vote because it's where we want it to be. But it sounds like we need some information. I know it's probably frustrating for the operators, but I also think it's a good time for us to be having this conversation. So, Madam Chair, I think we could, there's 4 items. If we wanted to, we could take a vote on repackaging and sort of put it on hold. We can vote on it today with the expectation that it's going to sort of be on hold with the whole package. Because it sounds like all the 3 other items, we need to table them till November. As soon as we have the information, we can take a vote on that's going to make us all feel comfortable for the next iteration of this license. So I'm curious of people's thoughts on that.
So Commissioner Camargo, your thought is to, I guess, make a decision on repackaging so that is now removed from the next conversation and we focus on the remaining 3 items.
Correct. That would be my recommendation. Not with the expectation that it's going to get promulgated in the next 90 to 120 days. It has to be part of the package. But the same thing that we did with the pilot project for social consumption, we voted on it and then we put it to the side until we finished the whole regulatory process. But it would be one item that we can scratch out and then sort of finish those 3 other items. Again, that's just my recommendation. I leave it up to us. We're having a collective and collaborative conversation here.
Commissioner Stebbins, I think I saw your hand.
Sure, thank you. Step back for a moment. There were other issues that we heard a lot from the delivery couriers about. One is around the dispatch rule. I think kind of there was some concerns about the 30-minute check-in every once in a while. It could prove to be a public safety issue for a driver. But just before we moved on, I just wanted to hear your thoughts, Chair, and your thoughts, Commissioner Camargo, on that issue. Is it something that we should think of addressing, or kind of where it sat in terms of priorities for any potential regulatory change?
I will tell you my perspective, and then I'll let Commissioner Camargo offer hers. And I've said this when we've met with the operators, is whenever we're talking about a provision here that we're talking about security provisions, I'm in from the public safety perspective, I'm apprehensive about removing anything else if we are to go forward with removal of a second agent being a requirement. And that's been my position, but I also would, take any input that our Chief of Enforcement and Investigations would have, not today because it's not one of our issues that we're focusing on. But I'm open to having an additional conversation. But just so you are aware, and so anyone else who's listening is aware, I sort of saw if we are going in the direction of that only one agent requirement, that we maintain public safety and those security provisions that are in place. I'll do Commissioner Camargo first and then Commissioner Stebbins, since I think she's answering your question as well. Commissioner Camargo.
Yeah, no, thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Stebbins, that's a good question. And I know that it's part of, there's a lot of other things that the operators brought forth. I think I'm with Commissioner Concepcion. We haven't really, I think we know where we're at in terms of the 2 agents in a car in terms of the conversation, but until we don't get all that data, all that information, and,
Sure.
and we don't know where we stand, I think that dispatcher becomes an outlier right now. And I think to Commissioner Concepcion's point, anything security wise, that we may move right now could cause another ripple effect. So for me, I think I'm on a pause with that one right now until we can, figure out the 2 agents in a car decision.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Sure. And first of all, let me say I greatly appreciate the focus to this point, and obviously we're talking about a number of issues that have been raised with all of us, but I appreciate the focus on those kind of expanding the market opportunities for these license holders and folks thinking about pursuing a courier or an operator license. So I appreciate that perspective, again, expanding the market opportunities for those operators. There was one other question, one of them, which are we deciding will fall into that question of delivery to no towns, is the suggestion that we change and allow delivery to hotels.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember how we might have thought through that one, or whether we're folding it into the discussion of delivery to no towns, or whether we're setting that one aside.
I guess Commissioner Camargo.
Thinking in real time here, and taking a step back, Commissioner Stebbins, we had this conversation with the operators. We will have to do a little bit of more homework in terms of delivery to hotels. It wasn't part of our original batch here, because we thought that the items that we did bring forward are the top priority identified by different stakeholders. We talked to the public safety subcommittee. We talked to, some elected officials. We talked to the operators themselves, and the delivery to hotels, again, sort of another outlier for now. But it is a question. We would have to do some work, Commissioner Stebbins, in terms of, maybe reaching out to, the Hotel Association, or understanding what it means for hotels. Is that a primary residence? All that good stuff. If that's something that you would like to look at, Commissioner Stebbins, maybe we can talk about that for the next batch. And I think because we're having a conversation holistically, which is something that I heard all of us say, a few months ago, we can add it, right? What does that mean? What does it mean? We haven't had the conversation. So I'm happy to figure out, Madam Chair, if you're open to it, figuring out what steps do we need to take to understand what it means to deliver to hotels.
I am, so 2 things. I guess generally speaking, I'm open to that conversation. I think that's going to take longer. I think that's something that there are a lot more conversations, a lot more stakeholders involved in that conversation. You have to then start thinking about the different municipalities that have, a large conglomerate of tourists that visit frequently. So that is an issue that has a few different things going on with it that will
Sure.
take time. And for that reason, I'm like, I can see that taking a longer, more extended amount of time to really get a comprehensive understanding of what that space looks like, and then reaching some sort of consensus with the different stakeholders about the best way to move forward with it. So that's where I'm thinking right now. Commissioner Camargo?
Yeah. And I think, listen, because we're having this conversation and we're all here, I think we can have this conversation. I think, Commissioner Stebbins, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a mind reader, but I think where you're coming from is because we do have social consumption coming down the pipeline, and we do have tourists in our biggest towns. And I think about the Berkshires. I think about, places that are far out and need access to product that may be small hotels, small breakfasts, or small bed and breakfasts and things like that. So I understand, and I'm also just thinking, how does this tie into social consumption? But I think to Chair Concepcion's point, that will take longer. And I think that the top priority right now are sort of the issues that we've brought forth. So we have to think about it. And Commissioner Concepcion, I'm happy to have a conversation with you afterwards so that we can think about that. But also, I don't want to waste time with the top priorities and the top issues that we do have on the table, because we're going to have to go through a long process in terms of the regulatory language, in terms of comments and all that other stuff. So, but Commissioner Stebbins, I think I know, where you're going with that question, which is a fair one.
Can I ask you, because we're all together, and so this can be an open conversation.
Yeah.
The hotel component to cannabis, is that something that Commissioner Stebbins and Commissioner Camargo, that you all plan on addressing in the social consumption space this regulatory round? Commissioner Camargo?
Yeah, and Commissioner Stebbins, I'll give it right back to you. I think it's something that we have been talking to people throughout the country. There's hotels, there's things happening at hotels that are specifically for, cannabis consumption. But I think we're in the conversation. We've been having conversation. We've been gathering information on it. I think the delivery component of it is, I think, and Commissioner Stebbins, I'm going to just give it to you, but because I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you asked about the license cap as it relates to social consumption, because these are licenses within the universe of equity, right? And once social consumption does come, what does that mean for tourists? So if we don't allow hotels in Massachusetts that are just social consumption, right? There's a hotel in Colorado that specifically allows for social consumption. If in part of our framework, we do not allow for hotels to have, consumption in the sense of a lounge or things like that, then how do we also, how do we discuss and talk about the marijuana delivery operators to increase their license type to be able to deliver to hotels, because we may not have an option for hotels. So that's a lot, but that's the matrix of social consumption. Commissioner Stebbins, I'll kick it to you if I can, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Sure, thank you, and appreciate the discussion. And Commissioner Camargo makes the point. We've had a couple conversations, primarily a 420 hotel chain in Colorado that wants to offer social consumption on their property. They're still working through, as you can imagine, some of the regulatory work that needs to be done. Thinking about delivery to no towns and the question of delivery to hotels and thinking through what might be the business expansion opportunity for that. I think it's important, and I hear you both, to think this particular item through, but at the same time, I want the delivery operator and delivery courier, stakeholders to understand, looking at all of the issues that you've suggested to make this license type more lucrative and more success, more financially beneficial and rewarding for the applicants in the space. I will tell you, I will reach out to I think there is a hotel association in Massachusetts, just to get their initial feedback, but I definitely hear from the two of you that this may not be teed up and ready to go for what may be the next grouping of regulatory changes. So appreciate the discussion.
No, Commissioner Stebbins, I appreciate you raising that and offering to gather more information for us as well. I think that will just be beneficial for everyone across the board. So thank you. Sure. Commissioner Roy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to put a pin in something related, and that's around the RVT. And when Director Khumalo talked to us about the 40 incidents, whether it was crossing into other states, delivering to no towns, federal housing, diversion, that there was a lack of training, that more training needed to be done. And Chris Bevery from Your Green Package had sent a letter, and it was signed by many of the delivery operators. And basically, he said the delivery curriculum for RVT was not released until years after the first delivery company commenced operations. 0 classes on delivery were available to the first social equity cohort due to the fact that the delivery regulations were not released until 1 month after the first cohort concluded. Delivery companies, and then he goes on a different topic, but my point being is, if we do make changes to this license type, how does that reflect over to an updated RVT? And how do we ensure that folks who are in this first cohort, how do we ensure that everyone has the best training around delivery, to just so it reinforces public safety, public health, and how do we tie that in, just to make sure? And I just want to put a pin in that. Like, we have to keep our eye on the ball, that folks have, because Director Kamala said more training on compliance needs to be done, and we have to be mindful of that, of social consumption too. What kind of training is going to be around that? So I just want to put a pin in that conversation.
Thank you, Commissioner Roy. And thank you for putting it in the chat so I can read it as well. I think the thing that stands out to me, it doesn't really, but my initial reaction was that the curriculum was not released until years after the first delivery company commenced operations. The first delivery company commenced operations in April 2021. Is that correct? And then operators came online last year. But I will take that, and I think that that's a good note that you made as well, Commissioner Roy. It is still it's our newest license types, so there's some work to be done. And clearly, from Director Kamalo's comments, training is really important in this space. Commissioner Camargo.
Madam Chair, may we have a bio break and also a few minutes to consult with legal about sort of next step?
Okay. How long are you thinking that for the 10 minutes, 5 minutes? What do you?
Bio break 7 minutes and conversation with legal 10 minutes. Okay, 5-minute bio break.
Wait a minute. Okay, we'll take a 10-minute break. I guess we'll break until 11:20. So, Commissioner Camargo, can you please make a motion for us to recess until 11:20?
So moved.
Commissioner Roy, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Commissioner Camargo?
Aye.
Commissioner Roy?
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. We are in recess until 11:20. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Hello, Commissioner Stebbins.
Hello.
Commissioner Roy. Hello, Commissioner Roy. And I think we're now looking for Commissioner Camargo. Okay, we are all back. Commissioner Camargo, I will give you the floor to sort of bring us back to this conversation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, and thank you for that break as well. I think it was well needed. I just want to thank all of us, for all of our commissioners and our team, legal and Matt and everyone who has been part of this conversation. I think it's obvious the conversation continues. I had some questions around repackaging and sort of the process, and what does it mean in terms of the language and repackaging as a whole. So my recommendation is that we keep repackaging as part of the continual conversation. And myself and Chair Concepcion will meet with our team in the next few days to get a little bit more insight. But I want to make sure that whatever language we put forward on any of these, that they're very clear. And we will cross that bridge when we get there next month.
Thank you, Commissioner Camargo. Commissioner Stebbins.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank the team. I'm glad you had that chance to chat during our break. Is it helpful, or I just want to get a sense that both you, Commissioner Camargo, and the chair have a warm temperature, I guess, in terms of pursuing, more thoughtful, in-depth look at repackaging. I think at the 30,000-foot level, I think the four of us might have some agreement on that. Obviously, the details in further analysis is incredibly helpful, but again, and I'm thinking to our broader audience right now that's listening in as well, do you feel that the temperature check is that we're willing to explore it? It seems possible, again, without more details and more legal. I'm comfortable with at least stating, my level of comfort with that, or my temperature check, so to speak.
Commissioner Camargo.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. Yeah, absolutely. And I think all of us from last Thursday's conversation to today, I think we're all in the same page when it comes to repackaging. I think our temperatures are all sort of on the same page when it comes to sort of the license cap as well. I think just, I had stated in a few, minutes ago, I guess, in terms of possibly voting on repackaging. And I think just strategically, and so that we're not also, and I'm being fully transparent here, so that we're not confusing the process with just voting on one thing today, that we bring it all together for the next meeting. And that way, it also just gives us an opportunity to make sure that, our team right now is working on the implementation and that model host community that everybody's waiting for. I want to make sure that both externally and internally, we're finding the balance in order to go full force and then rewrite regs for delivery. So I think, Commissioner Stebbins, you agreed, and if you do, that'll be great in terms of having conversations with, maybe folks in the hotel universe. Maybe you can come back and report out a little bit on that. I think that we would really appreciate that. And I think we'll hear from legal, Matt Gincola. We're going to meet with Noam 2-on-2. And then myself, I will set up a meeting just to sort of get, sort of the little bit more granular when it comes to the repackaging. But it sounds like our temperature is all moving in the right direction. And I've said this in the past, we need to make, smart policy decisions, not just some emotional decisions, because I know everyone's waiting for this, but we want to do it right. Commissioner Comisión, I'll yield my time back to you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Roy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to remind everyone that we are mandated Section 550, subsection G, to reevaluate white labeling and repackaging. So it's part of what we're mandated to do. And I just want to get a clear understanding. When Commissioner Camargo, when you say we're on the same page on repackaging, could you just provide a little edification? Because I need to know what that page exactly is.
Commissioner Camargo.
Thank you. Commissioner Roy, thank you for the clarifying question. I'm hearing what I heard, and if I didn't hear that, then please correct me. But what I heard us say is that we are supportive of repackaging. And as long as we know what the operational aspect of it is, once again, I know that Noam Kamalo had spoken to that earlier today. But I think that we were on the same page in the sense of like, we think we want to look at this. It's something that sounds like we're supportive of, as long as we understand what the operational pieces are in it and what does it mean. So I correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Roy.
Commissioner Roy.
Yeah, I would say just a little short of that. I'm open to the conversation, and I want to hear more, but I'm not casting an affirmative vote today, or none of us are. But I just don't want to give folks the wrong impression that my mind is, I have all my information, I have all my facts. So I just want to say yes, I'm open, absolutely, to this conversation and learning a little bit more. And so I just don't want to mislead anybody at this point. That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner Roy. And that's helpful. That adds to, the fact that there's more information to gather, and that today is not that day for a decision to be made. So that's helpful to know. I think just to wrap up, I wanted to thank our staff, because they operate in really, really short timelines and timeframes. I know we're asking for some additional work on this piece, but I also want to, I guess, let them know that we're also mindful that just last week, Chapter 180, those regulations were just filed. So we're going through our implementation stage now to make sure that we're satisfying that mandate, following that law, and getting our internal operations in place. So I guess I'm saying that to my fellow commissioners as well when we're talking about the additional regulatory work for some of these new issues. I know staff is working overtime, so we will do some things and make sure that when we're having these conversations moving forward, that we're level setting and making timeframes that are feasible for everybody, with everyone in mind. Because I mentioned earlier, there's some other issues that we will bring up. I know Commissioner Roy, I believe you and Commissioner Stebbins might be having that conversation around micro businesses really soon. So it's important that we have these sort of talks and sort of a really clear, transparent understanding about what this process looks like for everyone involved. So thank you, Commissioner Camargo. I don't know if you had any additional comments on this piece. Are there any other questions from my fellow commissioners around the delivery space before we move on to the next topic? Okay, Commissioner Camargo.
Thank you. I just want to make it clear, are we all on the same page about next steps? Just so that we're very clear to the public and internally. It sounds like we are. It sounds like Chair Concepcion, your closing remarks were there, but I just want to make sure that our two fellow commissioners, you all, okay, I see you nodding. Okay, cool.
Commissioner Camargo, did you want to restate those next steps? Do you want to
Sure.
just put it there so
Sure, I'll do that. Yeah. We still have a lot of work to do. We are going to check in with legal, allow them to do their work. We are going to check in with our Director of Government Affairs and allow him to do his work. Commissioner Roy has added a few other things. I think it was the B2B, the B2C, and in terms of other states that, what are other states saying, or what are we hearing from them? Noam Kamalo will be working, our Director of Investigations will be working on the NODs and the incidents, and she will be meeting with us 2-on-2 from now into when we get that done. And we will be, myself and Chair Concepcion will be talking to CNE about CIE about sort of repackaging and understanding that on an operational level, so that we can have some more information and understand that. And Commissioner Stebbins will be looking into the hotels, and I think that's it for now. That's what I have.
And Commissioner Roy, do you have any particular questions around repackaging that you would like to be answered within this time frame by the next time we have the conversation?
I asked it last time if there were any issues with white labeling or repackaging, and Director Kamalo said not that she was aware. So I just want to get confirmation of that. That, you know, I kind of put her on the spot with that question. So I just want to make sure that there have been no issues in the past. And if I think of any other questions, I'll be sure to send them your way for that. So thank you.
No problem. Commissioner Camargo.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. What I'll do too, and I think a lot of us do that, but but I'll go back to Thursday's meeting and sort of look at or hear everything that we talked about in terms of the issues, the concerns, and then I'll go back and re-watch this meeting as well, and possibly just put something together on email, maybe just Commissioner Concepcion, you and I, so that we have it, so that we don't miss anything, so that the next time that this conversation is coming up, we have as much information as we need and sort of a plan to sort of move forward, because there's still a lot of moving pieces in here. So I'll do that.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Just to, I brought it up on Thursday again. I don't think it rises to the level of priority issue, but I did want to put on the table, you know, should we give some thought and consideration to lowering the amount of product that a delivery operator or courier may carry, realizing one, that they're really not running a risk right now of bumping up against that that dollar figure, but at the same time, you know, might be helpful in terms of public safety that we begin to, you know, give information that these delivery vehicles are not carrying as much product as you might think. But again, happy to kind of set that conversation aside, and happy to have some more conversations with our internal team on that question in the meantime.
Commissioner Stebbins, thank you for bringing that back to the table. That might be something to keep in mind too when we have the conversation in November. So thank you for that. Okay, I was looking at Commissioner Camargo. I thought you were getting ready to press the button. Okay, all right. So with that said, I think we have come to a conclusion on this conversation, this discussion piece. We have our next steps. Thank you to the entire commission for having a really thoughtful conversation around this. We want to get it right. We want to get as much information as possible. We want to move forward in the best way forward. And Commissioner Stebbins, your comments around marketability, like the way that you frame that, I think that's something that we were doing and not even really realizing that we were looking at these other pieces in a way to just develop some other ways of approaching these licenses and making them a really good, valuable option for people. So with that being said, Commissioner Camargo and Commissioner Stebbins, I believe you are both the sponsors of the next item. There's been a lot of questions around social consumption. Every time I bump into anyone, they ask me about your work. So I think a lot of people are looking forward to this. So I don't know who's going first, but I'll hand the floor over to you both. Commissioner Stebbins.
I will start. I'm certainly going to invite my colleague, Commissioner Camargo, to chime in, but I'm going to let her give her vocal cords a rest. But I know she'll weigh in as we go through these slides. First of all, thank you to my colleagues giving us a chance to update folks. This really is just a simple update, but you'll see as we get to the end of the slides. First of all, there might be some information in here that you were not aware of or that we haven't had a chance to discuss with all of you at a public meeting. There are a couple issues at the end that I think we just want to flag for your attention that just might take some immediate consideration in terms of budget and a few things that are coming up in the next couple of months. So we wanted to flag those for you as well. Some of this information, I apologize, some of you might have seen before, but at the same time, I think it's a chance for the regulatory working group and our entire team on that to just kind of go through, revisit what we've done, kind of the direction that we're going, some of the additional work we still have ahead of us, and then obviously at the end invite some discussion from my colleagues. So we can go to the next slide. First of all, as you may recall, Commissioner Camargo, members of our working group, and I hosted 3 listening sessions and open to the public. This is, I think all of us can appreciate, is a very proactive step. It's inviting buy-in, it's inviting comments even before we get to the hard work of, redlining regulations or writing new regulations. So we hosted 3 listening sessions, 2 in person, 1 virtual. I really was encouraged by the members of our team who also attended these listening sessions just because they were curious or they happened to live nearby. We had a tremendous turnout from potential licensees, local officials, advocates, and some folks just simply interested in the subject matter. Greatly appreciate the time and participation of those who attended, who offered their ideas, their views, and suggestions. A special thanks to Akila Armstrong for helping to coordinate our work with our community college hosts and our entire team, our SEP team who showed up to engage with our SEP participants, and our comm teams for helping us get out the word on these hearings as they were happening. Commissioner Camargo?
I don't have too much to add, but I think that I'm so glad that we had the listening sessions. One, we were just able to meet folks in the space within the universe of folks who can apply for this as we speak. And I know that while we did that, we also met with elected officials from the cities and towns. I think I said this on Thursday in my comments, but part of us having these conversations and starting to think about what social consumption will look like is that we need to take every opportunity to educate the state and municipal leaders as to what what needs to start taking place. So I think these public sessions allowed us to start hearing from folks, elected officials, but also just people who live in these municipalities where this will possibly roll out. So that's all I have to add.
Okay. We can go to the next slide. Obviously, as you all know, in addition to our listening sessions, we reached out directly to those interested parties who would be eligible for a social consumption license. Those are our social equity program participants and licensees, our economic empowerment partners, micro business eligible applicants, as well as our cooperative growers. The survey, which included both option questions and open-ended questions, went out to over 1,000 recipients. We received back 142 responses, which is just about 14%. I want to extend a special thanks to Megan Doobie for helping to pull this all together, Celia Williams and the equity team, and Marianne Circus for her help as well in terms of looking at the results. For this slide, you'll also see a number of organizations and entities that we have connected with as part of our outreach. Mass Municipal Association, Mass EON, Mass Chiefs of Police Board, our 3 appointing authorities, the Commissioner of Public Health and the Mass Regional Tourism Councils. They're thinking through, again, kind of as it related to our earlier discussion, around how social consumption might fit within the tourism industry here in Massachusetts. We are also doing some outreach to the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, the full CAB board we will speak to at their next meeting. I do want to thank Matt Giancola and Cedric Sinclair. We talked about is there the right subcommittee to approach, and when we realized that social consumption might transcend some shared authority by all of the subcommittees of the CAB, we decided it might be more appropriate to address the full CAB at their next meeting, which I think is hopefully going to be scheduled in December. And again, we're also circling back and meeting with the cannabis policy co-chairs, Chair Donahue and Chair Gomez. But I think you will find that we will circle back and return to this important group of stakeholders as our work continues. Commissioner Camargo, anything you want to? Commissioner Roy?
Commissioner Roy.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. I'd be curious. I'd love to read those 142 responses. Is there a way you can share those with us, fellow commissioners? Because you have a wide array of organizations and departments, so I'm sure there were different opinions depending on. So I'd love to read those at some point.
Sure. Our intention is to put those results that we got in a readable format. And as we move ahead with our work, that will be certainly something that we'll make available to all of you.
So I also have a question on this slide. Of the
Sure.
142 respondents, were they like majority SEP? Do you know sort of what universe they fell into?
I believe they were predominantly SEP,
Okay.
which is right the group that we really wanted to go after and hear from. But you know, we'll break those numbers down for everybody, and that'll be part of what you'll see in terms of results and the different questions that were asked. But really can't thank our team enough, especially Megan Doobie, who really led the effort on creating the survey, and all of the working group looked at the questions, thought through the questions. And again, we're also had some open-ended questions to really allow respondents to give us their ideas, as opposed to just answering our questions directly with option A, option B, or option C.
Commissioner Roy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Stebbins and Commissioner Camargo, is it possible that we can receive those earlier rather than later, before you bring us policy recommendations? Because there'll be a lot to digest when you do bring us policy recommendations. So I'd like to get my head around those surveys ahead of time if possible. Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Camargo.
Commissioner, yeah, thank you, Commissioner Roy. Thank you for that. I can only imagine. I'm excited because you guys we've been anticipating all your questions, so this is really exciting. Commissioner Stebbins and I, and this will come at the end of the conversation, but I'm going to bring it into the fold now just so that you all know where we're going. We're trying to bring you chunks of updates, and then we're going to be able to bring. Bruce and I have been calling it sort of a binder, but it'll be in a presentation form of everything that we're collecting, all the conversations, you know, the data. How do we put it out there for you as commissioners to read, but also the public? So a lot of this information you will have way ahead of time, and I think that the conversation at the end, again, I'm kind of going a little bit ahead of schedule here, is going to be how do we do this in terms of next steps, so that this is a big topic to wrap your head around, and we're trying to just give you pieces of it today so that you're prepared for the larger conversation. So Commissioner Roy, trust me, I love what you're asking. We're there. So
Commissioner
Right.
Stebbins.
Sure, we can move on to the next slide. I'll kick this off, and then I know Commissioner Camargo will want to jump into some more detail. It's important to acknowledge, obviously, other jurisdictions have legalized adult use cannabis before Massachusetts, and many of those states have expanded the industry into social consumption. It helps not to reinvent the wheel. It also helps to learn from our counterparts in other jurisdictions. So our team conducted a visit to San Francisco and Oakland this summer. Our team was also planning a visit to another key jurisdiction this summer, Colorado. Unfortunately, the trip was delayed until after July 1st, which threw us into a new fiscal year, and we decided to postpone that trip, obviously, because of the status of the Commission's budget for the current fiscal year. But what we have attempted to do with respect to Colorado is to reach out to those public entities and businesses and trying to reconnect with them virtually. But happy to hand it over to Commissioner Camargo. She can offer some more detail on the team's visit to California.
absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. And I know I talked about this a little bit on Thursday in terms of our trip to Cali. You know, I will say, if as fellow commissioners, if you haven't been to a social consumption lounge or event space, whether here in Massachusetts on a private note or any other state, it's so different when you talk about policy and you're trying to develop policy and then you actually see these locations. We were there for 3 days in terms of working days, packed agenda. We met with stakeholders in San Francisco, from the Department of Public Health to the state regulators in California. We crossed over to Oakland, visited tons of locations in terms of social consumption spaces and social consumption spaces in San Francisco. A lot of the models that we saw were connected to retail space. You're going to hear a little bit about that down the line here in the presentation. I talked a little bit about infused food, not there yet in Cali, but we did hear a lot and we learned a lot. We met with the research, the head of research for California, who provided some insight. And I know that we've been working with Dr. Johnson here as well, and you'll hear more about that in terms of, research and for us to just understand how does it all play in. The pictures you see here, and I'm happy, I have a few more, but these are the ones that we sort of chose. The picture you see here on the top is Mo Greens. It's a newer location. It has basically it's a lounge feel. There's indoor smoking. What I was sort of really wanted to see was sort of the door that connects from the retail space to then the lounge area, right? And how that door vacuums and how tight it closes. And again, Mo Greens is a newer space, so it looked a little bit different. We also visited a very popular one, which got grandfathered in San Francisco. It's called Barbary Coast. We went to that one as well. Here in the bottom, this is their equity applicants. They're in Oakland. It's called Rooted in the 510. This, as you can see, he was showing us the plans. This is a huge warehouse. They have a beautiful dispensary in the front. And then in the back, they have this I have to look at my notes for the square footage, but it's huge. This will be sort of, I will call it sort of a Dave and Buster's of social consumption. They're planning for, an arcade, sort of a karaoke open mic area, sort of a lounge space. It's going to be very innovative, very fun, but also just a place for people to come and consume safe. So we went to other places in San Francisco, Urbana. Interesting because it was a retail space with a very, very small social consumption space, about 5 stools where people can consume there, but very small. And it's speaking to them, a lot of tourists basically are using the location. We visited a location called Blunt and More out in California. Out in Oakland, over by the Oakland A's stadium. And they had a retail space and then an outdoor lounge. One of the things that we learned over there was that Oakland, and this is sort of what I was kind of told, Oakland sort of took a risk on social consumption and also on outdoor smoking. They have an ordinance that allows for outdoor smoking, but also they made sure that all the businesses did their due diligence with the community members to allow for outdoor smoking. Blunt and More is at an industrial park, so there's not a lot out there. We visited another place in Oakland called Mary Jane. Mary Jane had another beautiful dispensary, and then when you walk towards the end of the dispensary, there was a mocktail sort of bar. And then when you pass that bar, there's the outdoor smoking area, and people would, bring their lunch, consume, possibly, go about their business. So there's a lot of places that we visited. We also talked about sort of legacy operators. One thing that I found very interesting in Oakland is that the city of Oakland gives out equity grants for equity applicants. And one of the grants that they recently gave out was about $1 million grant for an equity business to buy a building to start doing some work in there as it relates to cooking and some other stuff. So There's a lot happening in California. I think it was very helpful for myself, our acting general counsel, Andrew Carter, our one of our team members on the equity team, Akila Armstrong, and the head of compliance investigations, Yao GB. I think it was us four went, and it was eye-opening, but also just the opportunity to see it in person, understand it, walk in, look through the glass, feel what consumers will feel when they're consuming in these social spaces. A lot of what we heard, and you'll hear throughout this process, is that for these places that are connected to retail space, the traffic comes in through retail. And in San Francisco and in Oakland, you have your regulars, but a lot, at least downtown San Francisco, it's heavy for tourists. I could keep going, but I'm going to pause here for a second just because I have a lot of information in my head. I do appreciate our team that went with us. We have, I know a few months ago, Commissioner Stebbins and I sort of wrote a quick op-ed around this, but one of the things that we gathered from here was social consumption is not just lounges. As of right now, I think for California, it's heavy on lounges connected to retail, but we have been doing a lot of more work to understand what does it mean past the retail space. So I'll stop there, and I'll just stop there, Commissioner Stebbins, because I have a lot.
Commissioner Camargo, you answered a question I had already. I was wondering about, for other jurisdictions, when how they've rolled out social consumption, is it always like a brick and mortar where you have the retail space and then a lounge? Do you I'm sure, and I don't want to get ahead of you all, I know that there's more to this presentation. I guess I'm curious about the different avenues that somebody can come into this space. Like, what does that look like, or should it look like here in Massachusetts? But also, I guess my question for this slide is, are there jurisdictions that are doing it outside of that retail lounge makeup?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I'll also just share, I'll sort of say this comment and then sort of answer your question. The retail model, from the folks that we've spoken to and that I've seen, the retail model works for retail locations that have foot traffic and that are constantly either having events in their space and very engaging activity at their lounge space. Commissioner Stebbins and I have talked a lot about, is this license lucrative, right? What does it mean to have a lounge? I think one of the other things that we've been hearing is, just because there is a lounge space doesn't mean that it's always going to be occupied, or that there's always going to be customers there. I think, and Commissioner Stebbins, you can, tell me here, but I've heard more folks throughout the country tell us that they have to constantly create engagements within their locations so that people can use the lounges. In places where there's heavy tourist traffic, like in San Francisco, the lounge space works because there's a lot of traffic, but it's not where this is a constant, it's packed all day, every hour of the day. But you will hear more. We'll break down more for you all in terms of options and framework for Massachusetts as well a little later. I don't think today's conversation, but a little later down the line. So that's what I can tell you for now.
Commissioner Roy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Camargo. On Thursday, you had mentioned when you went on that fact gathering tour that 4 items that you saw happening out in the West Coast, and some of the social consumption sites or areas had CBD products available. You had mentioned number 2, you had mentioned cool down rooms. Number 3, ride sharing programs, and 4 was infused food. So if you could just share with us what the concept is of what a cool down room is. I think we know, but if you could talk about that a little bit. And my other question is, you've gone to urban areas where there is a lot of tourism, a lot of foot traffic, there's public transit, there are Uber and rideshare. Will you be looking at more rural, suburban, and how, I mean, it's different when there's not public transit and maybe not rideshare available. So I guess,
Yeah.
are you looking at urban and rural, suburban? And could you explain the cool down room concept? Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Commissioner Roy. I kind of didn't want to. I have so much in my head because I've learned so much in the last few months. So I appreciate you bringing me back to Thursday's comments. In terms of infused foods, I will share internally after this conversation just sort of the bills in California that are sitting around food. Commissioner Stebbins and I will talk a little bit more about the infused sort of food model and what we've learned thus far. I said it on Thursday. There's not a lot of folks in the country doing it legally. There are legacy operators that have amazing infused food dinners. I will say this, I spoke to someone, I think it was in Missouri, I said it on Thursday, but I spoke to someone who is doing, who's a legacy operator and is conducting dinners. It was so comprehensive, the dinner plan, the application to be part of the dinner. This is a private dinner legacy operator. In terms of the application, the process, the education that goes into an infused dinner. And then one of the things that she shared with me was that they add a cost for a rideshare as part of their application and to be part of the dinner. Again, this is an illicit market, but I was very impressed that they still had a lot of guardrails and policy. Of course, you got to be 21 and all that other stuff. So that's a little bit around infused food. And that's not the California trip. That's conversations we've had with people throughout the country. In terms of the cool down CBD areas, we really spoke to folks about public safety and public health, which is part of our pillars here, and equity when it comes to the social consumption sort of rollout. Surprisingly, folks have not had a lot of incidents. The incidents that people have been sort of one person falling asleep on a couch, and later on they woke up and said, I'm a mom of two, I'm exhausted, I came to consume, I took a nap, right? And that's what that person, and this was in Colorado, and this was a virtual tour, and that person just wanted to come, wanted to have a safe space to consume, and happened to fall asleep. And that was one of the situations. In my trip to San Francisco and to Oakland, we spoke a lot with regulators and with operators. That was like the top question. And at some point later on the line, I will invite Yal GB and Andrew Carter and Akilah Armstrong to be part of these conversations so you all can hear from them as well. But for folks who the bud tenders realized were a little bit over the line in terms of being they just overconsumed. They were able to recognize them being having consumed a little too much, and they provided cool down spaces. So I asked, okay, so what does your cool down space look like? And it's basically a designated space for them to either lay down, have some water, have some snacks, and they provided CBD products to sort of bring down the high. Everybody does it differently, but it's something that what I've heard from folks is that, at least the operators over there, is that it's something that they appreciate having in place, which is a cool down area in the CBD, a lot of water, and a lot of prepackaged munchies. For lack of better words. So Commissioner Roy, to your question, those are also some of the policy issues that we need to, look at and understand. One of the other things too, and when I visited Oakland and San Francisco, I was very intrigued by what am I signing? Am I signing anything? Are there waivers for me to come into this lounge? And every different operator had a different waiver, right? And that's obviously going to be more on the operational side for these operators. But I was very curious to that. So there's definitely a lot of these granular issues are things that we need to think about, both from the regulatory side, but also the operator side. And we have a long list of things. So I'll stop there.
Just to touch on this last point, obviously, we've had communications with other jurisdictions. You can see some of them there. Obviously, California and Colorado are already in the social consumption space. The other jurisdictions are somewhat new, like we are, so we're having conversations with them to see what they're hearing, learn what they're learning, and see what information we can share. I'll spotlight Nevada. Interestingly enough, I think the day we had a conversation with them, they were actually putting out their applications for the social consumption license type. What was interesting to me, and we'll talk about this, I think, in the next slide, is terms of outreach in strategies in communication with our municipalities. Nevada was aware of one local jurisdiction that said wherever the consumption lounge is or the consumption site is, we're not going to ticket or tow cars around that property. If we see that they're there in the morning, that's a good sign that maybe somebody did the right thing and, you know, either got a ride home or got public transportation or got a ride share home. So that was just one community's way of trying to be an effective partner with the rollout of this business type. So we'll move on to the next slide.
I have one question before we move on to the next slide. Commissioner Stebbins, you I feel like you can hear my thinking for a second, because I was looking through the jurisdictions that are listed here. And I guess my question is, how many jurisdictions have social consumption online as a license type?
The ones, obviously, that group is the one we're talking to. California, Colorado, I believe Illinois has rolled out consumption lounges, has operating consumption lounges. Everybody else is still kind of in process for the most part.
Okay. And then how did you identify these jurisdictions?
I will invite Commissioner Camargo to help answer that question, because she was kind of leading our outreach.
Okay, Commissioner Camargo.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So your first question is how many? And I'm glad you asked that, because I recruited Matt Gincola's policy team, just Jessica and Callie, to help us put and again, this will come down the line, a separate presentation so that you all can see a picture of the country. So again, you won't see that today, but we will come back and you will be able to see every state that's doing it, where are they, and how far are they. So the ones that you've seen here are some of them. And I actually have the draft of the PowerPoint that we'll show you all at some point. But what we did is that my regulatory group was and has been focused on reading regs from all the states that have social consumption. So we will share that with you all as well. There's a lot of reading, but you will, there's some states that have 10 pages of regs. There's other states that have 50 and 200 pages, but our team has done a really good job, and myself, and that has been Matt and Andrew and Philip and Kathy, Oliver, and Mac on our investigation team, that for the last few months have just really combed these regs to understand their license types. I'll give you a quick example. Michigan has a license type that we're looking at, which is sort of an event license. And then they have, on top of that, they have sort of like an event organizer license. It's sort of two different licenses around events.
And they're online now. Michigan currently has, okay, got it. Okay.
So again, this is, to Commissioner Roy, to your question earlier, this is all the information that we want to be able to put forward, one, in a presentation in the future in terms of what these states are doing, but also so that you have all this information, so that when you say, wait a minute, I want to read all of this stuff, you can. And we'll be able to sort of highlight some of that stuff for you as well. So that's sort of how we did it. We've been trying our best to speak to as many states as possible. One thing that I found in reading the regs is that you read them, but I'm very curious as to how do they work practically, right? And I don't know if that's a word, but what does it look like on a practical note and an operational note. So the Michigan one is very intriguing to me because it's a double sort of event license. And I've heard from folks in the West Coast that it becomes a bottleneck for that license type. So I'm waiting to actually have some more conversation with folks in Michigan around that event license. But again, you will have a more thorough analysis of states, and you will have access to read some of these regs if you would like to. Otherwise, we're going to sort of find a way to, give you some overview on each state at some point.
Thank you, Commissioner Camargo. Commissioner Roy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And if I guess for the ones that are online, the states, the jurisdictions, is it possible to find out, as I mentioned before, urban versus rural, suburban, because there are challenges for folks where there isn't public transit, and what do those states do, if anything, to address that around with the public safety and public health lens in mind? So if you can do a virtual tour or interview anyone in a more rural setting as well, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Roy. I heard you loud and clear, and I'm just thinking of folks that we've already spoken to throughout the country. But I will look back and see, what we're missing from that request. So, and that's actually very helpful. That's very helpful. So, thank you.
Yeah, if I can just, sure. Thank you, Chair. Just to Commissioner Roy, to your point. What I have found interesting, and again, going back to Nevada, Nevada was issuing licenses per county. It'll be interesting to go back to them now and see where they got those responses. As everybody knows, Nevada is not just Vegas. There are a lot of very rural parts of that state as well. Colorado, the same. We've had a number of conversations with folks, obviously, in and around the Denver area, but we've also found some business models outside and more rural areas, places that allow for social consumption, but they might be someplace that you're already staying overnight. So different business models as we're doing this deep dive on what other jurisdictions are seeing in terms of license applicants.
Commissioner Camargo.
Yeah, if I may, and Commissioner Roy, I want to just share this with you because it's the only time that we can sort of have this conversation in open discussion. But let me just give you a preview of what we've asked our government affairs and our public analysts, policy analyst team to sort of look at. And I'll just give you this one example. So Colorado, these are the 4 issues that we sort of looked at. What are their policies in indoor ventilation? Under that, it says decided and regulated.
You're muted.
Yep. Clean air regulations, right? That's another topic there. A club is exempt from the Colorado Clean Air Act of marijuana consumption purposes if it's fully ventilation. Outdoor smoking regulations. Consuming activity shall not be visible from a public place. That's actually something that we did see in Oakland in an outdoor smoking facility where it was all covered in the back. You didn't notice that people were out there consuming. And then driving impaired regulations. Know that this is one of our top priorities in developing this. And for Colorado, I have here guidance materials on site shall include the following public safety information: smoking up to 35 milligrams of THC, wait 6 hours to drive a bike or drive, eat or drink up to 18 milligrams of water, THC, drink or eat, 18 milligrams THC, wait a minimum of 8 hours to drive or bike. Again, this is a snapshot of what we've asked our policy team to sort of look at per state and to find the indoor ventilation, the clean air regulations, the outdoor smoking, and the driving impaired regulations per state that has social consumption right now. And again, once we're done with that sort of analysis of the country, we'll be able to share that as well. And those are sort of like some of the priorities that we have in understanding what states are doing. So I just wanted to share that, Commissioner Roy, because then you won't hear that for a few months, but I wanted you to sort of hear that, as well, and Commissioner Concepcion as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Camargo. I think Commissioner Stebbins, I don't
Sure.
have any additional questions on this slide. And I don't want to get ahead of things. I know that you have more to share with us as well.
Thank you, Chair. We have two more quick slides. We'll move to the next one. Again, just to give you a little more background, a little more context. I think early on, Commissioner Camargo and I were focused on social consumption. We actually took the opportunity to reach out to communities that had been part of, the previous set of commissioners' working group on this topic. We talked to all of those communities that had expressed interest. This is obviously before our decision around the pilot program. I think for the most part, every community still seemed interested in those. Our communities that go from Provincetown out to Holyoke. And even though some of the different point people might have changed from the time of the original conception of the working group, I think there was still a sincere amount of interest from those communities in terms of continuing to explore social consumption. So we undertook that work. Obviously, the regulations that will be promulgated on November 9th are going to eliminate the pilot program from our regulations. And then, as Commissioner Camargo talked about, I think there is more of a partnership that we can create with communities, more about outreach, more about education, inviting communities to identify who their social equity and economic empowerment or micro business licensees that are already operating within their community. Talk to them, see what they are envisioning for potentially a social consumption license within that host community. And then ask yourself potentially, how does allowing social consumption allow communities to satisfy some of the components of their equity plan? So again, those are some kind of work steps that I think we've had to create, but I think a big step was our vote to eliminate the pilot program and the regulations that'll be promulgated on the 9th, and then continuing that focus of outreach to communities and where communities can be a strong partner and ally for us in this effort. Commissioner Camargo?
I think you added all of it. I just think, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record for the next few months. This is about education, both to the municipalities, to the operators, and to consumers, in terms of what will this look like and what can you start doing to better, understand. And I think, Commissioner Stebbins, to your point, it was great to have conversations with cities and towns that are interested and that were part of the original conversation. And kind of just getting their take on it, because one of the things that I think folks, want us to hurry up and get this out. We're one process, we're state regulators. We're one process. Cities and towns also got to go through their own process, and they need to figure out, what does this look like for them? How do they roll this out? What are things that they need to start putting in place? So a lot of the conversation was with the legal departments at these municipalities, so that they wanted to start getting ahead of it as well themselves. So, looking forward to the continuous conversation that we're having with municipalities.
Commissioner Roy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just looking at your bullets here, and should we be folding in the concept of social equity business as well? You have SCPEA. So I just want to that new definition was in statute 180, and now we have just submitted regulations to Secretary of State that also incorporates what a social equity business is. So I just want to be mindful of that.
Absolutely.
All right, Commissioner Stebbins, I don't have any questions on this slide.
Okay. We'll move to the next slide. Again, this is just some topics that we thought it was important to put in front of the commission today. Again, want to continue to inform our stakeholders on our progress. Timely review is needed by all of us because, as all of you know, we're in the final steps of preparing our FY 2025 budget request to the Executive Office, Administration and Finance, and subsequently to the legislature. We have had conversations both with our communications team, but I think there needs to be some buy-in, and I think our final budget request will be presented at our November meeting. I know we have not been very successful getting our FY20 or previous fiscal year public awareness campaign line items fulfilled. But our team felt, as we're getting ready to roll out social consumption, I think there's a sincere and important responsibility on this commission to have our awareness campaign align with where our regulatory work is going. So I just plant that as a seed. Obviously, when we get to our conversation around our FY 2025 budget request, and I would also, as one commissioner, encourage us to think of this as a multi-year program. Even though we don't have the details on it, I would like to see this be a component of our public awareness campaign request, not only in FY 2025, but in subsequent years. Is we want to send a message of safe behavior. Don't overconsume. Commissioner Roy, to your point, don't get behind the wheel of a car if you've been consuming, you don't feel right. But I think there is a responsibility on this commission to make our push and make our ask for the public awareness campaign money to reflect this new regulatory framework whenever it gets rolled out. But let's start the message sooner rather than later.
Commissioner Roy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question on your anticipated timeline, and I appreciate the fact you absolutely have to do your due diligence and as much research as possible. The conversation before this was around delivery and folding in other items, maybe micro businesses. Is this something you anticipate social consumption would be at the point where we would fold it in to that, or would this be after the delivery micro business steps are taken?
Commissioner Roy, you are aligned. That is exactly the question that I had. I was waiting until the end. Commissioner Stebbins.
Yeah, I will tell you my viewpoint and certainly invite my colleague to weigh in. Obviously, my feeling is social consumption is a big piece. It really takes a lot of necessary time and planning. When I look at those, Commissioner Roy, to your question, stacked up against some of the other things that we are being encouraged to move on, which may not be, from a staff's perspective and a commission's perspective, a big regulatory lift. Whether it's clarifying micro businesses, taking some of these steps on delivery, courier model, or the delivery operator and the delivery courier changes, and any other kind of changes that we might want to throw in to that regulatory discussion. I'm not sure. Again, I think it's a question we need to follow along and see what's ready to go and when, and what takes more time, more discussion, and more deliberation. So if it works out that they could all go together, that'd be great. My expectation, and just speaking as one commissioner, is probably some of these other items might be ready to move sooner. And then I would suggest that if social consumption isn't ready to go in that same time frame, that becomes a separate regulatory process.
Well, Commissioner Stebbins, I guess in that same vein, and this is something that was asked of me recently, and I'm like, this is a working group currently with Commissioner Stebbins and Commissioner Camargo, but is there a projected time frame or timeline where you think that we might be at a point where we're having the conversation with drafted language?
For me, I don't want to commit to that date. I will tell you that I commit to the working group doing everything we can. As you've seen, we still have more conversations to have and more follow-up to do. So I don't want to commit to a time frame and set everybody's expectations and then fail to meet those expectations. But I can tell you that we are working diligently on this, and there's much more work to be done, and again, much more information to provide to you and Commissioner Roy for your consideration as we move through this.
Well, I will say that part is clear. The amount of work that you all have done is evident in this presentation. So thank you for giving us this update, because I think I'll speak for myself. It's helpful to understand the thinking and what you have done so far, and understanding the different communities and people that you've already interacted with. Commissioner Camargo.
Yeah, thank you. I'll take this opportunity just to update you all again, because we're here together. So we had put our social consumption group on hold, our regulatory group, while we were working on Chapter 180. So we had met, Commissioner Stebbins and myself meet every week. Tomorrow, we're actually in the Worcester office with our whole regulatory group tomorrow to sort of reconvene and to work on next steps so that we can come back to you all and be able to present the other batch of findings, right? This is sort of like an introduction. We have a whole bunch of other work that we've done that we're not presenting today just because we're trying to do it in chunks and pieces. So, but we will be meeting tomorrow. We have a sort of like a half a day kind of, I don't want to call it a retreat, but a convening of the minds of our regulatory group tomorrow. So I think we'll have some more direction for you all, possibly the next meeting as well. So just to give you a little bit of insight of what's happening on our regulatory group.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I can.
Yes, please, Commissioner Stebbins.
Sure. So the next two bullets, are advanced RVT program and training requirements. And I think this does tie back to the conversation that we had earlier around the career and training requirements and enhanced RVT program for delivery. We've had a sub-working group of the regulatory working group focused on training. In both what the RVT program might provide, as well as training that operators might require of their staff at a consumption site. First of all, there was, I would say, a unanimous agreement that an advanced RVT program and training requirements must be made available for social consumption. Obviously, that involves, kind of some of our current RVT training curriculum around recognizing somebody who may have overconsumed or is consumed before they arrive at a social consumption licensee's facility. Are there additional things that we need to do with, training around alcohol? Somebody who might have consumed too much alcohol before they walk into an establishment. So obviously understanding that RVT piece requires, bid specifications, it requires respondents to reply to us to want to provide that type of training. But again, this is a step I think I'm flagging for all of you that is something that we want to undertake. So the training is ready, it's there, it's available for employees to go through before the license operation will open for business. So we've had a lot of good conversation around that. In the third bullet, I just kind of threw up there, and I think Commissioner Camargo talked about it with respect to what she's hearing, what she heard, during her trip to California, which is, does that standalone consumption facility business model work? We've talked about it from the beginning that we want to have a license type that's lucrative. We want to have a license type that somebody actually applies for. I think what we've learned through this process is that the standalone consumption facility business model may not be that lucrative unless there are other amenities or other business components that are attached to it. And part of our work is trying to figure out, how do we align social consumption perhaps with some of those other business entities, and some of those other business entities have their own regulatory framework and licensing framework to have to go through. So trying to pull all those pieces together is really where our work is. But to me, I put that up because I think that really was an interesting development or an interesting result or clarity that came from the conversations that we've had internally, as well as the ones that we've had with other jurisdictions. But Commissioner Camargo.
Well, before you go, Commissioner Camargo,
Yeah.
Commissioner Stebbins, it's clicking to me now. So this is when we were talking about hotels earlier. I'm understanding what we're thinking in this space, and I can also see from a public safety perspective how there needs to be a more in-depth conversation. But in terms of having operators on the road as opposed to being in a hotel where they're staying overnight and not moving around. So I'm thinking out loud, but it's clicking some of your earliest statements now that you've done this presentation. So thank you. Commissioner Camargo.
Yeah, thank you. I won't say too much, but I think Commissioner Stebbins it's exactly what we've heard throughout the country in terms of the standalone consumption facility. That's the norm, right? That's sort of what everybody thinks when they think about social consumption, that one, lounge, cafe attached to the retail.
Wait, Commissioner Camargo, when you say standalone, though, that you're saying standalone being just a social consumption site, not connected to anything else.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So let me just rephrase that. Thank you, because I just read from the slide. So in agreement with Commissioner Stebbins in terms of what we've heard throughout the country, I'll just say that. But what you'll hear in the next few months is sort of us thinking through what license types would fit in Massachusetts. And Commissioner Roy, birth on, urban, suburban, rural areas, right? But what license frameworks will work for us, for Massachusetts, but also that could be lucrative for our equity applicants at the end of the day, and that it's worth getting into. And this is where I think we're going to have to mind shift a little bit why this is a process. While we're learning this process, we're going to have to mind shift and think about what are those other frameworks and license types that would fit in. And there's a lot. So we need to come back and sort of have that conversation with you all, because it's not just the lounges. So I'll just leave it at that, because otherwise I'll go down a rabbit hole and it's too early.
Thank you, Commissioner Camargo.
Yep.
Commissioner Roy.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Stebbins and Commissioner Camargo, for the update. There have been tons of questions everywhere we go. This is like the shiny new object everybody wants to learn and know about. And I guess my question goes back to the social equity business, the definition. And while we're still in this phase, what do those folks do, those potential SCP? Are they able to start this pre-verification process with us? And the reason I ask this is because Commissioner Stebbins was with me when we went to that, I call it Shark Tank, for lack of a better term, where the pitch competition. And we heard lots of concepts about social consumption sites. And for those folks, even though we don't have the regs in place, are they able to start any kind of pre-verification at this point?
Commissioner Camargo.
Yeah, Commissioner Roy, that's a good question. And I think we can go back and think about it. But also, I think from what we've heard from operators as well, is just for some folks, and I know that there's current economic empowerment applicants and current social equity applicants who have space and are still trying to decide, is that something that I want to go into? Is it lucrative for me? And I think that other folks will not know until we have publicly sort of discussed the possible license types or framework for Massachusetts. But that's a really good question.
I see Acting General Counsel Carter has put his camera on. So do you have okay, by all means, Attorney Carter, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I wanted to thank Commissioner Roy for her question. So as it relates to the definition as currently construed, it would be limited to that universe. It would not encapture other potential license types. So I think that if there is an interest from the Commission's perspective on revising who falls in the sort of pre-verification process, that would have to be something that would be captured by regulation.
Thank you, Attorney Carter. Are there any additional questions? Commissioner Stebbins, Commissioner Camargo, did you want to make any closing remarks at this point?
Again, I just want to thank everybody for the opportunity, just to bring you an update, remind you and also the general public of what we've done so far, as well as raise some timely issues, but at the same time, it helps to hear your questions as we continue to meet with our team and we continue to press forward. So I greatly appreciate both your input, Chair, and your input, Commissioner Roy, flagging some of these additional topics for us. So that's how the commission's supposed to work. So happy to see that. Thank
you, Commissioner Stebbins. And you already were ahead of my questions. You've answered a lot of them before I can even ask them. So that's saying something. So thank you. Commissioner Camargo.
Well, I mean, I'll share with both of you that every time we have a meeting with anybody, we say, I'm going to put on my Commissioner Roy hat, or I'm going to put on my Commissioner Concepcion hat. What would Commissioner Roy ask? What would Commissioner Concepcion ask?
Oh, that's funny.
So, you know, we role play. We throw everybody out there. You know, what would the head of investigation ask? You know, what would our communications team
I wish
ask?
I could hear what follows that.
Yeah, me too.
It's sort of having multiple personalities while you're doing this, because we really value your opinion and your questions, and we're all experts in our own right, and we all are sitting here for a reason. So I think that we are taking it, you know, very seriously in terms of thinking what would so and so think, what would so and so say, right? And you know, one of our team members, you know, used an example and said, I'm the plumber of this team. And he said, I can tell you and help you all to understand, you know, what policies you're going to come up with, and then how do we make them compliant? Like, how do we write regulatory language so that our investigations and compliance team can actually then translate that into compliance, right? So we always have to, we're thinking about it, and I say it again in the matrix. But I just want to say thank you. There's a lot of work ahead, and there'll be more to come. Commissioner Roy, you made a quick comment about this is a new shiny object and everybody's talking about it. Commissioner, we haven't, I know that there's media and TV shows and radio shows and everybody's, you know, talking about social consumption. You know, folks are talking about the California trip. And, you know, I really wanted us to have this conversation first with you all and the public through this vehicle, instead of us just jumping on every and any TV station or radio station that wants to know about social consumption. This is about, you know, us as regulators thinking about how to best create a framework for Massachusetts, and then we can go out there and educate the public. But, you know, today's, you know, we've been waiting. Trust me, we've been waiting. I speak Spanish. I had a Spanish news station ask me when we were doing the Chapter 180 work, and they're like, "Puedes venir a hablar de las cafés de consumption?" And I'm like, well, we're not even there yet, right? They were asking me, can you come talk about social consumption cafes in Spanish? I'm like, we're not doing that yet. So today's a really important day for us because we get to sort of really update you on our work, but now we can sort of continue to have the conversation and decide when we start going out there and talking to others so that we can educate the public, the media, our legislators, our municipal leaders, and most importantly, our applicants and their investors about what would this possibly look like. So it is not cheap. Social consumption is not cheap. So we got to think about all this. So thank you. Those are my closing argument comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Camargo. Commissioner Stebbins.
Sure. I would be remiss if I didn't thank the folks on our regulatory working group. You know, I've mentioned a couple of them already because they've really stepped up and took leadership opportunities to guide our listening sessions, guide our survey. I'll put them on this, you know, having Kathy, who works so closely with our medical patients at the table with us, Mike McCarthy, because of everything he did in the past life around local licensing and local municipal licensing process. He's been an incredible resource, so can't thank the team enough. And they know tomorrow we're kind of back into it and gobbling up a lot of their time every week, but I greatly appreciate everything they've contributed.
Thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. And do you, before you guys go, are there any upcoming events or hearings that the public should be aware of? No? Okay.
Not at this time.
Okay, okay. I just think that that's an excellent component. The fact that you've all been out and about and in the public and having those conversations, specifically at community colleges throughout the Commonwealth. So I
And
tip my hats to you both. That's awesome. Commissioner
just one
Stebbins.
more point, obviously, for the 125 plus attendees who are listening to this meeting, obviously, folks can continue to weigh in with us through typical, our email chain, put in the subject matter social consumption, so we make sure that any incoming emails get right to the working group.
Thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. Okay. I don't know about everyone else, but I think we're due for a lunch break. It's 12:38 now. I guess we can do a 30. So Commissioner Roy, I see your hand up. So before I say this, I'll let you have the floor. Go ahead, Commissioner
Thank
Roy.
you, Madam Chair. Okay, can I kindly ask for a slightly abbreviated lunch break, only because I have a speaking engagement and I have to drive almost an hour to get there later this afternoon, and I want to be here for this next topic. So even if it's like 5 or 10 minutes less, I mean, I apologize to my fellow commissioners.
No,
I'm sure
that's
everyone's
fine.
starving at this point, but
I eat fast, so that's fine.
okay.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Sure, Chair, and I apologize for this inconvenience. I kind of have a hard stop at 1, so I might not be here when we immediately get back, but happy to hop back on as soon as I possibly can.
Wait, so let's
I
say
might be able to even do it remotely if that works, but I apologize for a little bit of a matter that came up.
As opposed, so you have a hard stop at 1. Maybe we'll do a 10-minute break now, and then I think that there's only one more item on our agenda today. We can get right into it. That's enough. That's not, well, it's not really enough time to really eat a full meal, but I can at least have some sort of sustenance in me. So let's say we'll say 5 minutes. We'll say 5 minutes. So can I have a motion to just recess until about 12:45? Commissioner Stebbins.
So moved.
Commissioner Roy, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I will now do a call of the roll. Commissioner Camargo.
Aye.
Commissioner Roy.
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. We are recessed for 5 minutes until 12:45. Okay, 12:45. Commissioner Camargo, I can see you're still chewing. Commissioner Roy, Commissioner Stebbins, that is the quickest I've ever eaten anything. We're back. Okay, so the next item on the agenda and the last item that we've had listed for today is the conversation around identifying an active executive director. So before we really dive into the conversation, I think it might be helpful to give sort of an overview of why we're having this conversation today and sort of, what may be the best next steps forward for us as a whole, as an agency. I put this on the agenda for a few reasons. The main thing being recent changes to key staff positions. I think that, of course, the commissioners here are well aware, our staff are well aware that our COO and FAO have recently moved on. And this resulted in some major changes to the delegations that were originally outlined by our executive director. So I think this is a time where it's important for us to make a determination of best next steps, to talk together as a whole, my fellow commissioners, about who might be that person, and understanding sort of the needs that we have in the interim time frame right now, while our executive director is on leave. So the key things I guess that I have in mind is understanding, okay, we're going to our budget process here, those conversations, and also understanding that the biggest expense that we currently have is around personnel. And that's with good reason, because we do a lot in this agency. We do it, there's added responsibilities and added authority, and we rely on staff to really play those key roles. So with that in mind, I guess what I wanted to do is start off the conversation with who I had in mind, and then open it up to my fellow commissioners to just get some responses and have a full conversation. So I wanted us to talk about our Chief Human Resources Officer, Debbie Hilton Creek. Now, as we all know, Debbie is a military veteran, a human resources practitioner with over 25 years of management and organizational leadership experience. And as evidenced in our last meeting, she has really gotten up to speed on our policies and procedures here at the Commission in a really impressive amount of time. And she also brings a fresh lens with a focus on the people, the culture, and the best practices for organizational operations. So I wanted to lay that out, give some reasoning behind my thinking, but also, this is a commission decision. This is a commission discussion. So I will open it up to my fellow commissioners to also add, any opinions or thoughts that they might have as well. Commissioner Stebbins.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. And thank you for putting this item on the agenda. As you pointed out, we've had some key departures of some very key folks on the administrative side of our house. They've moved on to different opportunities, as happens during the life cycle of an organization. I know we're also in the final steps, I believe, of filling our GC. I will tell you, and I want to share this impression because I think it's important. It was great to see so many different staff team members participate in our conversation and around our meeting last week, covering a wide variety of topics, from office leases to current licensing update to, our CPO kind of unveiling our first real overview of the commission and the team and retention and diversity. I really welcomed that approach in seeing more members of our team have some face time with the commission during a public meeting. I think to your suggestion, Chair, I'm comfortable with it. This is really an administrative function, an administrative responsibility. This is not going to be huge changes in overall policy. This is somebody to, again, continue to help us operate day to day. And I fully expect, and one thing that has impressed me with our CPO since she joined our team is her ability to convene, ability to bring other members of the leadership team together. Obviously, they all continue to have their obligations and their duties to complete. But again, in terms of designating somebody to convene on questions in this intervening period, as well as, again, manage the kind of administrative, let me try to spit that out, the administrative and just operational functions of the commission. I think Debbie is a good choice, and she's had experience in very large organizations before. So I would feel comfortable with that choice for this designation, again, in this intervening period while the executive director is on leave.
Thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. Commissioner Roy?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I wholeheartedly agree with both my fellow commissioners. And I just want to remind folks that this board has a statutory authority to do so in the case of an absence or vacancy in the office of executive director, or in the case of a disability is determined by the commission. The commission may designate an acting executive director to serve as executive director until the vacancy is filled or the absence or disability ceases. The acting executive director shall have all the powers and duties of the executive director and shall have similar qualifications as the executive director. Now, also, according to with all of these unanticipated vacancies, we just mentioned our COO, our CFAO. We have, according to the Comptroller's Office, public agencies have reporting requirements. Chapter 29, Section 1 shall have an agency head. So I think Chapter 29 directs us to Chapter 76 that we have the statute that we need an agency head, and it's pushing us towards Chapter 76, which gives us the statutory authority to appoint one.
Thank you, Commissioner Roy. And Commissioner Roy, I've been really impressed with your statutory citations lately. You're really on it.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Camargo.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair and fellow commissioners. Thank you for that. Thank you for putting this on the agenda. Thank you, Commissioner Roy, for just bringing us back to the statute. I will say I respect the nomination. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that there's many leaders in this organization and part of our leadership team that can lead as well. And I think that, you know, we've lost Alyssa Stacks and we've lost Adriana. I have to say, you know, Cedric Sinclair has been a valuable member of this organization. I think he was the 5th person hired at this organization and has provided, I think, guidance and insightful training for all of us as commissioners here. And I know a lot of the equity work that falls in his shop. So I just want to say that also to Yao Jibi, who is another leader here at our organization, who has, you know, been here from the beginning as well, and runs, you know, the biggest department at this agency. So I respect the nomination put forward, but I would have been remiss if I didn't mention the rest of our leadership team that has been acting in this capacity while our executive director has been on paternal leave, and the consensus approach that they have been doing has been working. And I'm really glad to see that the leadership team at our organization can function. It was great to see a lot of them last week. I would joke around with Sean in the past that, you know, we got to see more of our team and more of our staff. So I just want to say that, because when you come to this agency and you're part of the leadership team, you're leading. you're managing your team, you're managing the outside, you're taking the hits. You're taking internal hits and you're taking external hits. This job is not easy. I just spoke to a staff member today who said he works from at times 8 in the morning to midnight, and that's real. So I just wanted to say that and thank all our team and all of our leadership team for the work that they do.
I'm muted. Thank you, Commissioner Camargo. Again, this is an interim status. This is something for the next few months moving forward to get us through the priorities that we have in place right now. So I will give the floor. I think Commissioner Roy had her hands up, but I also want to make sure our CPO has the opportunity to also just make any statements that she would like to make as well. So first, Commissioner Roy, please.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I just want to bring up, Madam Chair, you had mentioned in light of the circumstance we find ourselves in, there's major changes to the delegations, and that's absolutely correct. It was brought to my attention recently, and this is something that an acting ED may want to address, that delegation memo was not signed. So if this is something that needs to be signed, because in the spirit of transparency, this was brought to my attention recently, and I need to share this with you, and this is my only opportunity to do so, that delegation memo was never signed. So is it something that needs to be signed moving forward? I just needed to share that piece of information with you.
Thank you, Commissioner Roy. I think, thank you for the update. I think that, let's finish this conversation first, because it might kind of usurp that issue, because the delegation memo, we would then have a person in place that would function as our acting executive director. Commissioner Stebbins, I don't know if I saw your hands up.
Yep, I'm good.
All right. So I will now turn things over to our Chief People Officer, Deborah Hilton Creek, if you would like to make any statements at this moment before going to the next step in this process, please.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess all I can say is, wow. This is really an incredible opportunity, and I think, am I a little bit scared? Of course. Am I worried? No, because I do have an incredible team. We have an incredible team, and every day I interact with them, it reminds me of the work that we're doing here and how important we are as an agency. So I am not worried. I'm a little bit scared, but again, with the people that are there, there's no doubt in my mind that a collaborative effort will get us through this next few months. So thank you for the commissioners, or to the commissioners, for having that confidence in me, and I look forward to meeting all the goals that this interim role will be put in front of me, and I'm looking forward to working even more closely with everyone else. So thank you for that, and I totally understand the need for the short-term interim role, and I will do my best to make sure that I do whatever I possibly can for this agency. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Debbie. And with that said, I will state the motion language on the record. I will ask one of my fellow commissioners to make that motion, and for a second. So I am now asking Commissioner Roy for a motion in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 10, Section 76J, to designate Deborah Hilton Creek as acting executive director to serve until the return of the executive director. The acting executive director shall serve in addition to their current duties. Commissioner Roy, is there?
Yes.
So moved. I hear the motion.
So moved. Thank you.
Commissioner Stebbins, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, the motion has been moved by Commissioner Roy, seconded by Commissioner Stebbins. I will now do a call of the roll. Commissioner Camargo,
Aye.
Commissioner Roy,
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. We have 4 in favor, none opposed. We now have Executive Director Deborah Hilton Creek. Thank you so much. I'm thanking you in advance because I know that there's a lot to do. And Commissioner Stebbins, I believe we met your 1 o'clock deadline, so just barely made it.
I appreciate the patience of my colleagues.
No problem. Okay, so are there any additional questions before I move into the next phase of our meeting today? And I'll look around at my fellow commissioners. Oh, I see Acting General Counsel Carter, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. May I suggest the board would want to contemplate a motion to potentially direct you as chair to conduct and execute salary negotiations on behalf of the commission with the acting executive director.
Thank you, Attorney Carter. So that is a second motion. And for this motion, I believe I don't see her, but I'll ask Commissioner Camargo to make the motion to direct Acting Chair Concepcion to conduct and execute salary negotiations on behalf of the commission with the acting executive director. Commissioner Camargo, is there a motion? I think you're muted.
So moved. So moved.
Commissioner Roy, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I'll now do a call of the roll. Commissioner Camargo,
Aye.
Commissioner Roy,
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. 4 in favor, 0 opposed. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide, and I believe there's nothing that was unanticipated today. So our next meeting is scheduled for November 9th. It will be held remotely, virtually as well. And thank you all for this really informative meeting today. Before I ask for a motion to adjourn, I see 2 hands, so Commissioner Roy and then Commissioner Stebbins.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to my fellow commissioners for a great meeting today. I just want to confirm so I can prepare with Commissioner Stebbins on micro businesses. So, because we'll put slides together. So I just want to confirm that.
Yes, for November 9th. Yes.
Yes,
okay.
thank you.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Sure, and thank you. I had it right here on my notes. Reach out to Commissioner Roy around the micro business license type. I think there's some additional questions related to the micro business license type that we need to walk through with Director Potvin. I know he's been leading the work on the team side. The other thing I would suggest is for the meeting on November 9th is that we need to talk about those COVID era.
That's already on my list, Commissioner Stebbins. Yes.
Okay, because obviously we'll have to extend those if we think there's some reason that we need to write new regs for them. So we can either do that kind of over November and December, but we should. I'm glad that's on the top of your list, Chair. Thank you.
Commissioner Roy.
And Commissioner Stebbins just jogged my memory that the commission was supposed to bring us some data points around these extensions, right? Around the utilization of the curbside, they were supposed to bring us data points. I just don't know where that's at.
Do you remember which we've had so many meetings, but I'm wondering which meeting I might have to reference. I see Acting General Counsel Carter, so I don't know if you're popping in to shed some light on that question.
If I may, Madam Chair, no,
Yes,
I don't remember specifically. Although I do believe that that's something that we certainly can go back and look into, and then circle back with the chair, perhaps, who can then schedule the meeting agenda as accordingly.
Okay. Okay, so that I have some work to do between now and then. We'll figure it out. Are there any other comments at this point before we wrap this meeting up? No? All right. So with that said, I will ask Commissioner Stebbins for a motion to adjourn until our next meeting on November 9th, please.
So moved.
Commissioner Roy, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I'll now do a call of the roll. Commissioner Camargo.
Aye.
Commissioner Roy.
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Thank you all, and thank you to the team for all that information, all their work. 1 o'clock, I hope you guys have a break to eat fully and enjoy the rest of the day. So thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.